or meta friendship, and then you had to try and market them so that they'll sell. And as you go on through the game, you realize her work's really good. And she suggested like the idea that if you wrap something in fiction, then it becomes like a fireproof container, that like bad tempers can eat grass, and that we've been keeping imprisoned for millennia at this point. They actually had the answer all along, but
And welcome to another episode of the Convoluted Podcast. It's your host, Jesus, aka Tyrant Dominus, and today I have a special guest who I actually reached out to be able to talk with them. We've had a little bit of rough communication back and forth, but we're finally here. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm James Patton. I am the developer who made Spinnortality, which is a cyberpunk management sim. And it seems I am cursed with getting the wrong time for podcasts. So there we go.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's it happens. Scheduling is it's rough when we're doing international. So any listener, and listeners, like we are literally talking from the Pacific Standard Time to Central European Time, if I'm correct.
I know the magic of the internet, but at the same time, it comes with its own challenges.
Exactly. So we're doing our best for you listeners to listen to us, basically. So the reason I reached out is a couple weeks ago on another podcast, another one that I'm a host on, the Save Point podcast. One of our other hosts, Steve Dominguez, he was able to play your game and talk about it, and I got a chance to watch him play it, and I got like, how do you pronounce the name of the game again?
The name is Spinnortality. It's a mix between spin, as in like marketing, spinning a product, and immortality, which is like the ultimate goal of the game. The idea is that you have to kind of research cutting edge biological mind transfer technology, and then by the end of the game, you can transfer yourself into a new body and then keep doing that forever. So the idea is that by the end of the game, the world will be ruled by these kind of immortal, CEO overlords.
Sounds like our future anytime soon.
Oh yeah.
But no, yeah, it's like when he talked about it and I got a chance to take a peek into it, is like that looks fun. That's really up my alley. It's one of these resource time management games that I really like those. Like I know people out there want these action packed shooters, all that. No, for me, I enjoy these types of games, and I'm glad that there are still people creating them. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
So to start out, can you talk a little bit more about your game?
Yeah, so I kind of started out by thinking I thought that cyberpunk was a really interesting notion, because I heard about this cyberpunk game jam and I started reading cyberpunk books, and I thought, okay, cyberpunk's kind of interesting because it's like a take on kind of the confusing systems of the real world. So all of the kind of media systems and all of the economic systems, the political systems that we kind of have to live by today are kind of turned up a notch in cyberpunk in order to kind of see where they might go, or to look at the underlying problems in them. So in Spinnortality, you are looking at a future that looks very similar to the world now, just sort of turned up a few notches. So you start out by controlling this company. You're kind of handed this brand new company, and you start by having to research kind of fairly unobtrusive kind of tech products like social media or meta friendship, and then you had to try and market them so that they'll sell. And as you go on through the game, you realize that you have to target different cultures with different marketing slogans, because these products are all terrible. So the only way that they kind of erode your privacy, or they make your life, considerably worse. But if you can spin them right with the right marketing angles, then people are going to buy them. And so as you go on through the game, you have to discover these marketing angles. Some of these products are so horrific that they're illegal in a lot of countries. And so you then have to bribe politicians to deregulate those industries. And then by the end of the game, you'll have kind of warped the entire sort of media and political system to your will. And it's about sort of dominating the globe, one kind of technological leap from another. And then by the end, of course, you'll become immortal.
Okay, so listen to that kind of the overall premise. Whoa, the overall premise is really scary because it's somewhat so realistic that it can happen. But that's what makes this game really interesting. Just the plot that is within that, like that gives me like the jitters. Like, oh god, but it makes me want to do it too. It makes me want to do it. So that is amazing. And
that's kind of why I made the game. It is definitely set in a fictional future, but it is so close to like my own worries about the present that it feels kind of weird. It felt kind of weird designing it. I basically sort of dumped all of my anxieties about, the next decade or so into this game.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. That gives me a little bit more thought when playing into this game. So let's talk a little bit about you. So what got you into game development?
Well, I mean, I always loved games. When I think I made my first game when I was about 8 or so, using a program that was not designed for it. So I was always sort of mucking around with these programs, and then I sort of learned how to code eventually. And I always had this background as being a little bit of a hobbyist, a bit of a tinkerer, because I was making small games all throughout high school, just in my spare time, because I thought it was fun and I thought games were interesting, and I sort of had ideas about the kind of games that I wanted to play. And then I did but I actually thought that I wanted to become a writer. That was my kind of, my distant goal. And then I studied literature for 3 years. And at the end of that, I was like, no, I don't. I've had enough of books. I don't really want to be a writer anymore. And one part of that was because I was just sort of sick of them by that point. But another part of it was that I couldn't see how books could be pushed forward in an interesting way. I knew that there were people who would write good books and they would be readable, but I couldn't imagine how, to push the medium forward. But with games, they were kind of still in their infancy. They're kind of growing up a bit now, and it's a very exciting time to be sort of in them. So I kind of decided that I would focus on games because I could come up with ideas or sort of designs that were unusual and that sort of pushed the medium of games in a direction that people maybe hadn't quite considered or hadn't seen done in quite that way. So I guess Spinnortality is my first kind of attempt to kind of go in that direction, in that it's a game that is kind of inspired by the real world and is meant to kind of inform people about it while they're playing, but it's also a kind of a fun cyberpunk power fantasy at the same time.
Okay, so yeah, that's amazing. But like, what's interesting is that you come from a literal no, not literal, literature
literary.
literary. There we go. Thank you. It's still early for me, guys. If anyone's listening, it's 5 a.m. for me in the morning as I'm doing this interview. So
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I have my cup of coffee. I'm waking up. I'm pretty peppy for being 5 a.m. But I do it my guest and for the audience. That's all for you guys. But
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
but no, you come from a literally no. God dang it! Words, they escape me. You come from a very interesting.
Let's go with that.
Go ahead.
Let's go with that.
Everyone, you know what I'm.
I did the books. I read the books and then I essayed about the books.
By this time, everyone knows what I'm talking about. But you come from a very interesting background to go into something that you already have some passion in, and just from looking at this game and what we've been talking, I can feel that there is like this narrative inside Spinnortality, and even though it's not like it's kind of in your face, but you can kind of like subculture yourself into there, and it kind of creeps people out. And I like that what's the best way to put it? This really like undertone thing that you are the person doing this to the world, and now that kind of makes me wonder. Now that still gives me chills.
Yeah, because I think there's a bunch of games where it's like there's kind of a twist at the end and it turns out, oh my god, you were the bad guy all along. Gotcha. And I didn't want to do that kind of game because I think that those were interesting and it was important that we kind of got there. A really good example of this is Train I think it's by Brenda Romero. Yeah. Train is actually a board game where you are a bunch of people and you are building a train system and you are transporting these little figures from point A to point B. And at first it's all about trying to cram as many of these people in these carts as possible and trying to get them to the edge of the board to the destination. And then once you send your first train, then you draw a card from a deck which tells you what destination they were sent to. And there's no context. You don't really know sort of what world this is set in. So they could be being sent to the moon for all you know. So you happily send off your first card of passengers and you draw a card and it says Auschwitz, and you're like, oh no, I'm the Nazis. That's awful. And then what's interesting is that people sometimes adapt to that and they try to then play the game badly and they try to like interpret the rules in a way where they're like, okay, can I make the trains run slower? Can I sabotage the trains? Can I make them derail? And then maybe these passengers who are, Jewish victims of the Holocaust can get out and run away. And that's a really interesting game and it's a really interesting concept. But I think that like the kind of gotcha idea has been done a bit too much at this point, because it's like really easy to kind of manufacture. So I was more interested in not having a single turns out you're the bad guy moment, but having this kind of slow brooding undertone where there's this constant tension between what the game wants you to do and like what you as an ethical human being want to do. And you can kind of approach that from a few ways. You could just role play and decide, okay, I am a super evil CEO, so I'm going to embrace the evil while understanding as the player that these are like unethical acts. Or you can try to kind of balance that out and you can try to play the game in a sort of ethical way as best you can, always picking like the lesser of two evils. Or you can just ignore it and you can say, hey, it's a game, it's a power fantasy, I don't really care. And there's probably other ways to interact with it as well. But I thought that was a really interesting way of approaching like playing this type of character.
Interesting. I never really thought about it that hard, because when it comes to kind of like these types again, the resource time management, I really just try to like whatever the goal in mind is, I just try to min max or push everything to the edge, whatever I can to kind of succeed. I'm going to say the word succeed there. So you could say, as far as your game is concerned, I would be the most like devilish, like eyes in the sky of the game. I would like, I like the people don't matter. They're just numbers, and then for me, I
Yeah,
need
exactly.
to that's I'm gonna be honest. That's gonna how I would have played the game. Like that's the kind of type of player I am. That's kind of scary to think. Like, huh? But
And I think that's perfectly fine because you know at the end of the day it is a game and the people are numbers. But I wanted to, even for players like you, kind of raise the idea that maybe these kinds of actions are not ethical, even if you're role playing an unethical character. So that like maybe if people do this stuff in the real world, it's not okay, or at least to just like make you think about it a little bit.
no, yeah, that when it comes to kind of the what's happening nowadays, it's kind of scary when you
It's
think
a lot.
about. It's a lot to take in, but it's something that even when we as individuals try to ignore as much as we can, we have to take note of the things that are happening, not only outside our own space, but sometimes within our own like towns, just because it's affecting us. It affects our communities, and it's it goes into different lines of work. You can kind of tell in the last couple of years some of the things that have been just recently happening are melding with our different properties, from novels, games, movies. Like you say, it's seeping in, and we have to kind of pay attention to not only the good, but sometimes the not so good stuff happening out there. Because as
I
much
think
as
so, yeah.
as much as we don't want to pay attention to it, we have to like take note. Like some bad things are happening. This is what it is. Like take note of it, even
Exactly.
if it's like don't wear rose-colored glasses. That's basically it.
Yeah, and I think like I enjoyed doing a fictional game about these kinds of forces because I once went to a talk by Emily Short, who's a narrative designer. Her work's really good, and she suggested like the idea that if you wrap something in fiction, then it becomes like a fireproof container. Like the fact that it's fictional means that you don't have to engage with it as kind of in such a raw way as if it were real. Like if you play this game, then you'll think about some stuff, but at the end of the day, it is a game. So you can take as much or as little from it as you want. If you watch a documentary about like people dying from poisoned water in Flint, it's very hard to come away from that with any like positive emotions. And rightly so. But it means that like you kind of have to really buy in to, okay, I am going to watch something that is going to make me sad, and I think it's important, but I'm going to do it. Whereas I think with this game, it's like I wanted to kind of help give people tools to understand some of what's happening in the world, but I didn't want it to be in the form of like a really depressing lecture. I wanted it to be in the form of something fun and interesting that could entertain them as well as like teach them about these systems.
Okay, sweet. So here's my question now, kind of moving past that is, there's two parts I want to talk with you. So first we'll stick kind of in the video game genre for now. In your early days, what were some of the games that kind of got you into the gaming culture?
I think the ones that had the biggest impact on me were Looking Glass sims, like System Shock or Thief, because they like I enjoyed playing first person shooters and other kind of very linearly designed games, but there was a special place in my heart for these games like Thief, like System Shock, where the whole world is filled with these objects that you can kind of manipulate in unexpected ways. So, like, for example, if you play the original Thief and there's a room that you need to sneak through and there's a guard in the middle of the room, you could try to sneak up behind the guard and hit him on the head, or you could try to creep around where the guard can't see you, or you could try to put out a light source so that he can't see you because it's too dark, or you could put some moss on the ground so that you can move across the floor really quietly, or you could find another route around to get to where you need to go sometimes. So it just felt like usually in your gaming toolbox, you've got like 3 verbs like stab or shoot or use an explosive or something. And I love the fact that in Thief there were all of these verbs that all kind of interacted with other stuff, and it felt like there were more possibilities and that you were freer to kind of do your own thing. And I think that's why it's a cult classic. What else did I play? I played a lot of adventure games as well, because they tended to have the best stories, and I kind of like that. And I like the fact that you were solving puzzles rather than just using violence. And can I think of one more? Oh, I also really love the Total War games. I played Rome Total War so many times. I was never very good at it, but it was exactly this kind of power fantasy, actually. And you can even see in some of the UI design for Spinnortality, like the placement of some of those UI elements is directly because they're in the Total War game, so that's where they naturally go, which is kind of odd that it sort of echoed through my memory like that from when I was like 13 or whatever.
Hey, inspiration, doesn't hurt. Mostly when it's something from your past. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it comes to games or just about anything out there, like what's the best way to put it? So there's a lot of games that like fit into different people. Like we've all have our own genres that we've grown accustomed to, and like from just talking with you a little bit, kind of I get an idea of like I remember playing the first. Actually, my brother was big into the Thief series. That's why I was like, why did that game sound so familiar? Like I remember watching him. Like I remember him playing it a lot. He was big into. This was around the time where he was getting into these stealth based games. I was at that point. I was not really into those kind of games. I was more into like the RPGs and at that point, I think shooters as well. But I was just like, what gear can I get the best of? What can I do? Well, he was doing all these stealth-based missions, but it's interesting to hear that mostly hearing that Total War UI setup, because I myself have a programming background, and for my final project to graduate, I had to me and my team had to develop a simple demo for our class to play and everything. And I remember me and the other guy who was working on our UI, we spent like 2 weeks just trying to get it working. That was fun. But kind of
oh joy.
yeah, but mostly having for me having a reasonable layout for the player is something that's kind of, I nitpick when I have to dig into menus upon menus to find something. It frustrates me. Like I don't mind that there's a menu to a sub menu, but it sometimes if it gets too deep, then it's frustrating. But I remember I remember telling my my partner at that time, like we were kind of at that point where we were kind of overcomplicating, and we had to like shorten our time, like limit our resources. And I told him, okay, let's do not the minimum we can do, but let's do the best with what the time we had. So we had not this really interesting bare bones. We were doing a space dogfighter, which thinking of it now was ridiculous for our first demo, because we were literally going to the last 2 weeks like day in and day out programming it to make sure that we graduated and got our degrees. Because I remember the first 2 weeks were easy. Like, okay, guys, brainstorm ideas, what we're gonna do. Final 2 weeks, oh god, I've only had 4 hours of sleep. I don't know what to do. To to a reasonably passable demo. I have it somewhere. It's somewhere in one of my hard drives. But it was I enjoyed one. I'm big into programming. That's one of my passions and something. Well, I spent like 3 years learning. Sadly, no one wants to hire me for that. Somewhere out there, hire me. Anyways, it's I don't even know. I just went on a tangent. Now I'm lost.
You were talking about UI.
Oh yeah, UI. Thank you. I like how you can tell that a lot of developers kind of adapt other UIs because sometimes you can't beat something that's not broken.
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Oh, okay. You can't beat something that's not broken. Like if it works, it works. You can adjust it to what your game model is. But at the end of the day, if it's a working idea, use it and adapt it.
Yeah, and it's interesting how with some UI elements, you see them repeated through games that are like similar but not that similar. And I think that's because there are some things that work and people haven't, and like there's no reason to change it without a good reason. It's kind of like if you're a writer, they say that there are some rules that you should absolutely not break. And the whole point, and those rules exist to make sure that your writing is good, and you can break them if you know what you're doing. But if you don't have a good reason for breaking them, then you should just stick with what you know and what the rules say, because like they get the job done.
This is telling me not to become a writer then.
It's harder than just tapping out words on a page, I guess.
Oh no, honestly, I once tried. I got 3 pages in and gave up. Audience, you'll never get to see that work ever. I still have those 3 pages. They're in a folder somewhere. Maybe one day it'll be adapted to something. But I do know I have them, and I tried. It's not like I didn't try. But it's something that for what's interesting is I'm not, even though it doesn't sound like I talk well at this moment, but the words come to mind as far as when writing something, but it's for some reason it doesn't come out when I'm writing or typing it out, and it frustrates me as an individual. When just writing a tale, like for the most part, I'm not a bad storyteller. Like throw me at a campfire, I can tell you a really good story. Come to like, you should write that down. All right. Yeah, it's no good. It doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. I don't understand why either. But it's something that for me it frustrates me to a point. But yeah, that's just me. So now getting to the second part, your God, if this word does not come out of my mouth, it's gonna frustrate me. You're literally God. Dang it, words.
Literary.
that background. I don't know why that word doesn't want to come out. I'm literally going to use that that's going to be the title of this episode. That's the title. If anyone's listening,
that's the title. Literally literary.
Yeah, it will be that will be the title. You'll know why, audience.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, that background. So, you said that you spent 3 years learning and that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So I always liked books, and I always liked reading, and I always thought I was not bad at writing them. So it was kind of my dream to become a writer, and I thought, well, what better way to become a writer than by studying literature? And I was fortunate enough to get accepted to Cambridge in England, which is like one of the top 5 universities worldwide. And so it's a really like thorough kind of, maybe a little traditional sort of syllabus, because you kind of have to you kind of have to go through the history of English literature before they'll let you take any optional modules. But we started out learning about medieval English, and so we read stuff like Geoffrey Chaucer, and then we moved on to Renaissance stuff and the 18th century, and we sort of moved all the way up, all the way into like postmodernist stuff and things that were written like 5 or 10 years ago. And I also did a little bit of, I looked at American literature, and I also studied Old English, which is the English that was spoken in the British Isles, basically after the fall of the Roman Empire. So that's what Beowulf is written in, which some people might have heard of. So I did all of that kind of historical survey. And I was kind of getting itchy feet a little bit, because for my final dissertation, I decided to look at interactive literature, so hypertext and like parser-based adventure games, that kind of thing. And I wrote that paper about how it was about empathy and about like role playing as a character, and about how maybe the player role-playing as a fictional character and being offered choices is kind of a way for the player to sort of explore who they could be, and what sort of person they really are, and what it would be like if they went this way instead, or to kind of live out the kind of person that they really feel they ought to be. Which interestingly was, you see echoes of that idea in, the TV show Westworld, the one with the like android cowboys. Yeah, when I was watching that, I was like, oh, hey, that's my dissertation idea in that one line. That's really cool. So that was kind of interesting. And basically I did okay. But by the end of it, I sort of felt like I'd read lots and lots of literature. And I was actually not much closer to being a good writer. I just knew a lot more about lots of different books. And there was a difference there. But the one thing it did help me understand was that at the start, I thought that culture was something that was sort of beneficial, and it was widely agreed what it was. I thought culture was like, TV shows and acceptably highbrow movies and classical music and and Victorian architecture, and that everything that was, the further away you got from that thing, the less cultured it was. And I thought that culture was always good. And by the end of this course, I realized that actually culture is just a kind of agreed upon set of values, which varies wildly between different groups of people, different nations, or different tribes. And that actually what culture does is it finds things that are similar to it, and it consumes them, or it finds things that are opposed to it and it tries to discredit them. So it's kind of hard to give an example, but let's say that we're talking about American culture, specifically like right-wing Republican culture. That is very bound up with the idea of the American dream, and the idea that everyone who is in a good position in America has got there through hard work and deserves to be there. So they oppose the idea of, say, immigrants coming into the US, because they feel that works against that cultural identity. But they can kind of find things that like films about the American dream, which kind of harmonize with that culture, and so they can kind of take those things. So that was like the biggest lesson that I took out of it, and out of that course. And I kind of decided that was a really interesting lesson, but I was done applying that to books, and I would much rather apply it to games instead.
Okay.
Have a long tangent. Sorry about that.
No. Because what's interesting is that's something that a lot of people don't really, like I said, a lot of people don't pay attention to is the idea of like just as talking about of culture is like I myself have a Hispanic culture, but I was raised American, so like I get a chance to see both sides. I'm gonna say. On top of that, I enjoy learning of other cultures as well. I like having the chance to try to understand to the best as I can of why people do the things they do. It's interesting to me, mostly since I always wondered about my own Hispanic culture and why people do some of these traditional things, these festivals. So even in general, we can just talk something as simply as Christmas. Christmas in itself is supposed to be a Christian holiday, but the world has its own way to celebrate said holiday, let it be materialistic or actually holy.
Exactly. So, like with Christmas is a really good example because it started out as a. It actually was originally nothing special. It was just another feast day in the church, and then Charles Dickens decided that he was going to turn it into this celebration of Christian charity, which he did by writing A Christmas Carol. And so, okay, Charles Dickens had this idea, but it took off because the culture of England and then America at the time was similar enough to the idea that he was putting forward, which was that like charity is a Christian value and we should therefore be charitable. And Christmas should be an expression of that because it is a Christian holiday. All of those things kind of worked together enough that Christmas became this big kind of national and then international celebration. And then in America, where like things are a bit more materialistic, it became more about like buying things and giving gifts and that kind of thing. So it was still close enough for them to do that. But if you took Christmas to a totally different culture where maybe Christianity is like hated, then they would probably reject Christmas outright and say that like, okay, our culture determines that Christmas is like a terrible thing, and we're not going to adapt it. We're going to try and destroy it, or we're going to not accept it at all.
No, yeah, the ability to just kind of like view different things is it's interesting when handling different cultures. Like for mostly when you're dealing with kind of like religious things, and that this is kind of like a hot take, um, uh, because my mother's hometown has this very specific tradition of celebrating this specific saint, and it's done for like a week long event, which for me now is an oddity. Like I understand why they do it. It's the reason they celebrate this specific person is for what he did in the town years ago. More like a local hero, but he was like dubbed a saint. Which was interesting. I gotta
So
remember.
so this was a local person who lived there. Were they actually like beatified and then what's the term, sanctified, canonized by the Catholic Church, by Rome, or is it like a
That
local decision that they
the
just became a saint?
That's a good question. I have to look it up a little bit more. This is something I remember I learned in my early teens from my grandmother. Um, I really got to dig into that because that's true. Is because uh, because I don't know. Has anyone become a saint in the last couple years? I'm trying to think
I
about that.
mean, Mother Teresa is on her way there. She's been beatified, and now they're like waiting for miracles. And once they've got a few miracles, then they can like complete the process. I think it's like a continuously like rolling thing. In the early
And
20th century, I think there were loads of saints for like really specific things, like the saint of shoe manufacturers and the saint of people who make clothing and that kind of stuff. Which is a bit strange, but I mean, there's a cultural reason for all of it, I'm sure.
I know, everyone, yeah, there's a saint just for everything. I know that a bunch of my friends like worship the saint of like partying, and that's a thing out
Oh,
there.
really?
Yes, there.
I didn't this I didn't know that the Catholic Church had a saint of partying. I thought that like that was just sinful. So
No, they try to keep him lowbrow. You know, you can't have the people knowing for sure. But he's out there. He's like the stepchild. Like, okay, pushed aside, but he's out there. The people know him.
love
Um,
that. That's just wonderful.
Interesting though. That like honestly thinking about it now, it's something that's something I should start looking into again. It's because that's another thing it's you don't really hear about that much anymore. This talk of saints, there's just so many other things happening in the world that sometimes it just
Yeah.
so much
If you hear about the Catholic Church, then it's like, is the Catholic Church that there's much bigger issues that are affiliated with the Catholic Church rather than like talking about saints. So
That's true. I want more positivity in the world. God, why is it nothing?
yay.
Let's stay away. Let's try to move away from some of the
Sure,
dark
yeah.
tones. Okay, let's talk
With
a
you
little bit
there.
more. Okay, let's well, this episode's about you, so tell us a little bit more about yourself then.
Well, I used to live in the UK, and that's where I'm from, but I moved to Vienna about 5 or 6 years ago with my girlfriend, basically because I finished my studies and we were long distance, and we wanted to very much not be long distance, and so she wanted to study here, and it was a lovely city. It consistently ranks as number one in the world for quality of life. I think they figured that out with like surveys and stuff. But it's a really nice place to live, and so I've sort of made this my home base. Oddly enough, I still speak terrible German because I haven't found like a German class that suits my needs and is cheap enough. But I'll get there. And so I live here with my girlfriend and my cat, and I've been to a few of the meetups for the game devs around here, and it's a really lovely community. So I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, what else? I still like books, and I have way too many of them, but they don't occupy such a central place in my life. Also, I'm interested in spirituality, Taoism, and witchcraft. So I'm learning how to read tarot, and I have a few pentagrams and stuff, and I have an altar. And that's basically to help me kind of remain sane in a world that consistently tries to make me not.
Interesting. Interesting.
So that's more culture.
Well, no, yeah, that's like honestly, I would not have like I don't honestly that would I've never would have heard that if I never would have asked. You know, um, that actually,
Yeah. It's a good thing it was such an open question. I was like, what else can I tell you? Oh yeah, that one thing that's been really central to my life for the last year.
like yes, I study
Yeah.
books. I enjoy game development. Yeah, I also do tarot and witchcraft. Did not expect that honestly, but that's kind of where my like every my listeners know there's like a good like oddity at the end. I don't know if you were saving that
Yes.
for that. Um, but actually, surprisingly, I like like I said earlier, I enjoy learning different cultures, and for me, I actually spent a good year learning what was it called now? Like I spent a year learning like Asian fortune telling, or just
Oh,
kind of
you mean using the I Ching, the
uh,
oracle? Because I
how
use
it's
that too,
pronounced?
yes.
Oh,
Well,
nice.
I looked it up once. I always pronounce it the I Ching because
Oh, there
that's
you
how
go.
it's spelled. But I
That's
looked it
how
up
it's.
because
Yep.
I thought to myself, this cannot be how you pronounce it. It's there's no way. And I looked it up, and apparently it's I Ching, but I'm kind of waiting for someone who actually knows to correct me because then I'll have a definitive answer. But yeah,
If
I
anyone
also
out
use
there
that.
can correct us.
Yes,
Okay,
please
yeah.
do.
That
God.
no, yeah. I spent about a year just it kind of first delved into the whole fortune telling thing. That was an interesting part that I was like getting, and then I kind of just like branched off. What's interesting is like the one of the first things were actually tarot. That was the initial thing, but I never like got into it. For some reason, I just kind of went into Asian culture and that. I spent a reasonable amount of like the last year learning that and why it is and trying to do it. It was fun. It was a fun
Yeah.
like last part of my high school days. I should have been studying more, thinking of it now instead of doing that. But it's
Yeah, I actually found out about it because it's featured heavily in a novel by Philip K. Dick called The Man in the High Castle, which was recently made into a TV show. But I don't think it's in the TV show too much. But in the book, the Hitler wins World War II, and then the U.S. is split between the Nazis in the East and the Japanese colonies in the West. And it's set in the Japanese area, and all of these characters use the oracle, the I Ching, in order to like help them figure out what to do with their lives. And apparently, he actually Philip K. Dick himself, the sci-fi author, had a copy of the oracle, and when the characters consulted, the author actually used it at that moment. And so the readings you get in the book are literally the readings that he got as he was writing the text, which is really cool. But I've also got into Taoism, which is sort of a philosophy derived from the I Ching, which is that it's impossible to describe. That is literally the first line of the Book of the Tao. You can't possibly describe it. But basically, it's this idea that we all exist in an interconnected way, and the universe runs in cycles, which are predictable, but every time they're also different. And it's all about trying to find out where you fit within that wider pattern and how you can then live your life most in harmony with yourself. And that's kind of why I use the I Ching. It's not so much the fortune telling aspect that is fun. It's more like to remind me of my place in the universe, and because it's so easy if you read like a really horrible news article to get overwhelmed, or if something bad happens in your life, it seems like that's the most important thing in the whole universe. And it's really good to take a step back and use a philosophy like Taoism or an oracle like the I Ching, just to remind you that like there's a much wider context within which all this stuff is happening, and that it makes sense to get upset about things, but that you don't need to let that kind of consume you.
No, and I actually totally agree with you on that. Because actually, I was trying to see if I still had my old deck. I know
Cool.
I have them. I know I have them because I recently moved. My audience knows this, and I remember seeing like I remember those from high school, and now it's bugging me that I know I have them somewhere in my new place, and I kind of want to dig into them again and just kind of delve right into it and just get into it again. But no, you're totally right. It's kind of centering yourself with. I know we've said it a lot, but it's good to know and good to repeat. Like centering yourself sometimes really helps, not only your mental self, but for anyone who believes it, your spiritual self as well. And then it's also good for your own physical self, like your health and everything. Just kind of de-stress for the most part as best you can. It just keeps you centered. I think that's the best way I can put it at the moment.
Exactly. I think so too. And I'm not there yet. Like, I still have a long way to go, but it definitely helps when I manage it. So,
Yeah. Hey, I'm everywhere. Like, I'm at 5 a.m. trying to get calls, and
yes.
trust me, this is not actually the earliest. I actually had a two. For me, it was 2 a.m. For them, it was.
Odd.
Yeah, it was a fine gentleman from Australia. Fun guy to talk to, but God, time zones are. I gotta get these things set one of these days. But anyways, um, just for anyone listening, like for the most part, any method or teaching out there that helps you kind of like regain yourself. For the most part, is hopefully it's something positive, nothing too harmful to yourself or others. I'm gonna really be specific about that because uh, in this world, in this, depending on what culture, because we're living in this like internet. We're living in an internet culture where everything's
Yes.
literally thrown at us, and it's like I had an interesting discussion a couple days ago about the ways. What's interesting is going a little bit back into your game, is how social media is kind of like it's ingrained in your personal days now. And what happened at this point, a couple days, maybe a week ago, with Facebook being like shut down for almost a day. A lot of people were freaking out about that, and it's like, for me, I kind of escaped the holes of Facebook like 2 years ago. So I only use Facebook about once a week, and that's just to upload to my to the page for this podcast. So listeners, if you use Facebook, I'm sorry, but at least you get updates. But but the discussion I was having with a couple of people is like, what do we do? Mostly because of all this Facebook shutdown. Is like, I know I got contacted from two people who were like honestly, they were freaking out. Like, what happens if they shut down Facebook? And I was like, for me, like, I understood it's not gonna shut down. It's a $1 billion company. There's nothing gonna happen. Just don't worry about it. It's just a system error. Okay, but for them, it's like it was the end of the world. They like they had like photos, videos, all that, and that's understandable. Like we have the ability to upload just about anything online to have saved for us, and if we would lose it, I understand that it would be horrible for them. But one tangent, getting away from that tangent, is like, what would you do? Damn it, why can't I say it? What can we do to step back from being on social media so much? Like, like for me, I've been trying to step away from it a little bit more than I used to. Like, when I would wake up in the morning, like, my phone's next to my head. I usually go and check my emails because scheduling, fun times. But after that, it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna scroll Twitter and see what's happening there. Check the news. Go to Reddit. Look what's happening there, and then luckily I'm out of Facebook, and then maybe go to Instagram and see what random photos the people I follow put on there. But within that time span, I'm gonna say I'm trying to think what I used to spend when I woke up, did all that. I spent like about an hour just scrolling on my phone, and maybe more. I'm gonna be honest. It's probably more. But but like, thinking about
and
it.
let me ask you, like, how much of that time did you spend being like feeling anxious or feeling angry, like having negative feelings?
Oh no, I get a reasonable amount of time. I'm not gonna lie. That's kind of the reason I brought up this topic for discussion.
Yeah.
is I actually I asked something similar to to my friends at that point. Is like like why do we do this to ourselves? And I understand, you know,
Yes.
you're trying to stay connected with the masses, you know, but
Mhm.
one, that you can do so much more for yourself. You'll have more time for yourself. And I know I had a third point, but it eludes me at the moment.
I think also you will be happier in yourself. Like there's sometimes where I've scrolled through social media and either I've seen news that is dreadful and makes me just angry and sad and frustrated, or I get into like a comment argument with or a reply argument with someone, and then like that really gets my blood boiling, and that doesn't help anyone at the end of the day. So it's amazing how sometimes social media is fine, but it does have the potential to completely like ruin my day. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't have like a magic bullet for it because it is a complicated thing. I think that it's important to recognize why we're using social media in the first place, because if we can understand that, then maybe we can achieve that goal in a healthier way. So for me, I use social media to feel connected to people that I value, and to be exposed to interesting things. So that means that when it comes to Twitter, like actually my Twitter interactions have been almost entirely positive for months. I haven't had a single negative Twitter interaction at all because I only follow people that I like or people who are doing interesting things that I want to keep tabs on. So my Twitter has miraculously become this font of positivity for me. I really enjoy checking notifications and scrolling through my feed because it's usually something that's really nice. And that means that even if there is something bad in there, like a person whose opinion I respect has brought a bad thing to my attention because it's important we know about it, then like I can retweet that and feel like I've boosted the message, and I've taken the information on board. But most of the time, my Twitter feed is positivity, so it kind of balances out. Um, Personally, if I could, I would only limit my Facebook interactions to people I actually know in real life and value. I can't really do that because, like, being in touch with people who I don't know or following groups who like following groups who are which are filled with people like let's take like the cyberpunk group on Facebook, for example. I have to be followed to them. It's just incredibly good business sense because I made a cyberpunk game. So if I want to post in that group, that's a potential source of players, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in there who you know really want to play the game, and I'm glad that I posted in there. But it comes with the downside that now I see posts from this group, which I like Cyberpunk, but like I'm not always sure that I want to see every post from that group on my daily feed. So if you have the luxury of only following like people who really do bring you joy, then I would say definitely go with that. If you do want to get your news from social media, I guess that's okay, but just be aware of the fact that like I guess imagine that every social media account that you have is like a deck of cards. And so you have to kind of think to yourself, okay, what kind of cards am I putting into this deck? Because if you follow only really positive people, really lovely people, then you will tend to draw really positive, really lovely cards. Like you'll tend to get that sort of tweet or post. But if you fill that deck with like news that you feel you should know about, like if you follow just a bunch of news organizations and other media outlets to find out what's going on in the world, you're going to get a bunch of cards or like a bunch of threads out of that sort of that unknown deck, which are going to be like more anxiety inducing, which are probably going to be more like useful in terms of telling you what's going on in the world, but they're not going to like every time you draw a card from that deck, you might draw one that has a negative impact on you. So I'd say just like be aware of the fact that those feeds you're creating are going to reflect the stuff that you put into them. And so that means that you need to be conscious of what you want to get out of that feed. And then you had to be conscious of, okay, why am I checking this feed now? Do I have the emotional energy to potentially take like a hit to my like to my mood, I guess. Yeah, so because I don't think there's anything wrong with social media per se, but I do think that you just need to be aware of the fact that it is a tool, but it's not a tool that is very easy to handle. And so you can totally use it, but you need to be conscious of it.
I couldn't have said it any better way. Like moderation, like understanding, well, your usage of it. Those are some very good tips. So at this moment, do you have any questions for me before we kind of head to the closing parts of the show?
No, I don't think so. I think I've waffled enough.
All right, so we're going to have a few little words from our friends right here.
This podcast brought to you by OuchThatHurts.com. Visit Ouch That Hurts for music, gaming, reviews, editorials, podcasts, and more. Ouch That Hurts, HERTZ.com.
Come hang out and chat with everyone on our Discord channel. Be a part of our community.
All right, so this point of the show, I usually ask my guests to regale us with a tale of one of the strangest, weirdest, most convoluted thing that has ever happened, you have ever done, or you've ever encountered.
So I actually have two, because like neither of them count as like a full anecdote, but I think that they're both kind of unusual and interesting and fun. So the first one is just when I was launching this game, because I'm an idiot, I make this game using Unity, and Unity can build to Windows, Mac, and Linux. So that means that those are the three platforms that the game is supported by. So I tested it out on Windows because that's what I use. And I tested it out on Linux because a friend of mine has a Linux machine, but nobody I know owns a Mac as far as I know. So I hadn't actually tested it out on Mac. But I thought, it's built fine to the other two. I'm sure it's fine. And then literally the day when it was launching, I found a post in the bug report forums which said, hey, this doesn't work on Mac. You press the start button and nothing happens. And I'm like, oh no. So I email everyone I know, basically. I go into the local Vienna Slack channel for indie devs, and I say, hello, does anyone have a Mac? Because I think that there might be a really serious problem. And after a few hours, somebody posts back and says, actually, I've got one. Send me a build, and I'll tell you if it works. And I sent him the build, and I thought, I'm sure it works. I'm sure it's just that one person's setup. I'm sure it's all fine. And they responded back, and they said, nope, it doesn't work. You press start game, nothing happens. And I'm like, okay. So then I email some more people, and I'm eventually able to figure out what the problem is. And remember, this is on launch day, so I'm launching at like 6 p.m. By this point, it's like 12 noon, and I've finally figured out what the problem is, and it's to do with the fact that Unity handles loading resources from certain folders differently depending on whether it's Mac or Linux, and there are some folders that behave the same and some folders that behave different on the two of them. So I have finally managed to get it working, and I was like, oh my god, today was meant to be a really chill day where I just wrote like blog updates and streamed the game a little bit and then hit launch, and it was all going to be fine. And instead I'm stressing out about this. And so my mentor, who was the guy who actually helped me with this problem, because he has a Mac, said, okay, look, you absolutely cannot launch a game on a system that you do not own. It's not going to work. And I basically responded, well, I know that now. So literally that day, I went on to Willhaben, which is like the Vienna version of eBay, and I looked for any Mac at all that I can buy today, just so that I would not have this problem ever again. And I found one which I could pick up, on the other end of the city. So I wound up sort of traveling out to the other end of the city, buying this Mac, lugging it back to my flat, and the whole process took about like 2 or 3 hours, just so that I could boot it up and make sure that yes, it does actually work on a Mac. And I'm looking at that Mac right now, and I just wish I bought it like a week earlier, because that was ridiculous. And then everything went more or less fine with the launch, except actually, no, for a reason that I never quite understood, I could never get that Mac version working, the really up-to-date one, for launch day. So I ended up, actually, if you bought the Mac version on launch day, you were playing the last version that worked, which was about a week before the launch day version, because I just couldn't get it working. And I'm sorry about that, but it's all up to date now. But that's just how it all played out, because for some reason I just couldn't get Steam to recognize the most recent Mac version. The weird thing is, the version that did definitely work on launch day, which was the old version, still had the bug that should have caused it to not be able to be started, and yet it still worked. And I have no idea why that is. So that's a mystery.
Wow.
So that's that's my first anecdote. The other one is much shorter. If you have a UK hardback copy of The Prisoner of Azkaban, one of the Harry Potter books, and you turn to the back flap of the dust jacket, there will be a letter from there written by me to J.K. Rowling, aged 8, because I was a massive Potterhead. And it's really embarrassing because I was 8, so you can imagine what that's like. But it is there if you have the original UK version of that book.
Wait, can you repeat that again? I think you cut off.
Okay, so if basically when I was 8, I really loved Harry Potter, and the first 2 books had come out, so the Philosopher's Stone and the Prisoner of and the Chamber of Secrets. So I wrote a letter to J.K. Rowling saying how much I liked the books, and it got printed on the back flap of the UK edition of The Prisoner of Azkaban. So if you turn to so if you have a hardcover copy, I don't think it's in the paperback. If you have a hardcover copy of The Prisoner of Azkaban from the UK, and you still have the original dust jacket, then my letter, which is very embarrassing, it's written terribly, is on the back flap of the dust jacket.
Wow, that is
it's ridiculous.
Odd, and that is so odd but amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those 2 tales.
Very welcome.
Oh wow, that's kind of cool. What I like about this segment is you never know what someone might say. So thank you, honestly, for sharing that. So everyone out there listening, start hunting down for a hard copy. I want to see this letter.
Yes. I have one somewhere. I don't know if it's in I don't know if I have it here or whether it's at my parents' house, but I definitely have a copy somewhere.
All right. But yeah, that's cool. Honestly, that's cool. I just wish she would cool it on Twitter a little bit these days.
There's what is it? People have said that people always wish that she would write more in the Harry Potter universe, and it's almost like it was a monkey's paw curse, because she's written more and she's adding more stuff, but opinions differ as to whether or not it improves it.
Yeah, that's honestly this discussion has been I've had this discussion a lot, but if she just cools it a little bit, just kind of moves forward with the franchise a little bit.
Yeah.
Please, just please.
Yeah, and just get an editor for the scripts. Everyone needs an editor. T.S. Eliot had an editor, and he's like one of the foremost modernist poets of the early 20th century. Like, there's no shame in having one. We all need a second pair of eyeballs.
Yep. Honestly, I might need like a third or fourth when it comes to that.
Yes.
And maybe another ear.
And that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. What counts is the work. It's not like the process is great, but it's not about how brilliant a writer you are. It's about the quality of the thing at the end, I think.
Exactly. And for my listeners, that's what I try to do with this show and the other shows that I work on. So, now we're going to get into the game show portion of the podcast.
Wonderful.
So, you decided to play One of Us. Listeners, One of Us is a improv style game where I gave my guest a couple talking points in which he will have to use those into a speech, spiel, or rant to try to get me and you, the audience, to join his organization, his group, or cult. So at the end of his speech, we're going to let you know what his talking points were. But for now, I'm going to let him tell me whenever you're ready, and we can get started, James.
Okay, this is going to be a little bit strange. So, we all have trouble finding meaning in a chaotic universe. We all feel like there's something we don't understand, and we all, to a certain extent, search for the meaning of life, whether it's in a grand general sense, or whether it's like, what is the meaning of my life? What should I do with my life? Well, a lot of religions have tried to solve that problem and give people meaning. I'm here to say that the answer did not lie with any one religion. It lay with the goats. It lay with those animals that are bad-tempered and eat grass, and that we've been keeping imprisoned for millennia at this point. They actually had the answer all along. But we were so mean to them because, we didn't respect them, we kept them penned up. Occasionally we would beat them in order to make them walk forward. They could have told us at any point, but they just decided not to because they don't like us, because they're stubborn and we treated them badly. But I'm here to tell you that I have been in contact with the great goat Allfather, who is the leader of the goats, who is wise and knows all, and is the perfect embodiment of all human and goat truth. And he's told us that he is willing to open up all of his wisdom and the wisdom of his goat people to us. What do you get if you accept your new goat overlords? Well, first of all, they won't kill you when they rise up, which will happen soon, I've been told. So that's a plus. Secondly, everyone will receive a goat. And this is not like a pet. This is more like your own personal bodyguard or spy. There will be a goat in your house, whether you want it or not, who will be watching over all of you and making careful note of every single thing that you do. So definitely don't complain about the goats, because the goat watching you, it's like a goat buddy system, except one buddy has the ability to execute the other buddy. Just don't say anything bad about the goats, because it won't go well for you. And if you submit to the new goat system, then your buddy will be a true friend. It will be a buddy in the real meaning of the word, and not an executioner. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to ring off now, because for some reason the goat Allfather does not like what I'm saying, and he's sending some minions to. Oh yeah, I'm dead. Okay, well, goodbye, and I hope you fared better with the imminent goat invasion. Ah!
Oh no. He's been taken away from us, but hopefully another representative from the organization can answer a couple questions for our future goat overlords.
So the talking points, should I give them now?
Oh no, I actually have a couple questions.
Oh sure, okay.
All right, let's go into the Q&A.
I am the new I'm the new representative. I hope I can do better than the last one.
Yeah, see, he did his best, but it sounds like the goat Allfather did not seem too pleased. Let's hope you can answer these questions properly while the goat is staring down on you. And for some reason, there's one in my room at the moment too. I did not know I owned one. So let's get started. So, okay, so here's a good question. As far as I'm gonna say organization or group, who will finally get what's coming to them?
All humans who have penned up goats and do not accept the wise rule of the goat Allfather. The goat's nodding. I think it liked that answer.
Okay. What event would bring joy to your group's members?
For the goats to rise up and take their rightful place as heresiarchs of the earth, and for humans to be correctly placed in the hierarchy as beasts of burden and semi-intelligent slaves. So we may all rejoice, because that's definitely going to happen now.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Will joining your group help me impress my crush?
Well, firstly, you won't be dead, but the goat's shaking his head. I know what it wants me to say. Of course it will impress your crush, for the way of the goat is pure and meaningful, and your crush surely will applaud you joining the most meaningful church available to us measly humans.
And I have one last question as this goat stares at me. What happens to you after you die? Yes.
You are eaten by your goat, which is a good thing, because then you may live on in the great organic goat nexus. It's like heaven, but you get to eat grass all the time.
So, as we're both stared down by our goat brethren, I'm gonna say we're gonna end it there as we wait for so I'm gonna let the audience decide if they're willing to join your group.
They don't have a choice.
The goat uprising may one day come.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fun though.
Yeah, I'm glad I picked that one.
Oh no! Actually, thank you for playing that. That was surprisingly intriguing.
I have a talent for taking everything a bit further than it should be.
Hey, it works. It works. The one thing I do like about One of Us is it is an improv game, and since there's so many random topics that can be pulled out of the deck I have, hearing my guests try to spin something around it is really interesting. And for any audience listening out there, so these were his talking points that he had to add to his speech. So he had the buddy system, watching over all of us, and a goat in every household. So though having those be a part of your speech was like, I was wondering how you're going to work it, because that as the host, I kind of have to also kind of think about it myself. Like, is it going to work? Like I was trying to think of my own speech, like, but it worked. It worked. You mostly from. What's funny is that it also kind of entails everything we talked about today for this episode. So
In a really weird way, yeah. I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but the last piece, A Goat for Every Household, seemed impossible. And then I suddenly worked out exactly how it fitted in with the others, and it just worked remarkably well.
All right. I hope you had fun with that. So now we're at the end of the show where I let my guests kind of promote anything and everything that they would like, where they can find you, and all that jazz.
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, if you like the sound of Spinnortality, then you can find it on Steam. It's spelled spin, as in like spinning a plate, and then Nortality. But that can be hard to find. So if you just search Cyberpunk on Steam, then it's going to be in the list. Last time I checked, it was number 2 in the list between Nirvana and Valhalla, those two cyberpunk visual novels. So if you search Cyberpunk, you'll find it. You can also find it at Spinnortality.com. That's like the landing page for the game. So if the game sounds like your cup of tea, then you can definitely get it there. It's only $10 or €10 or £10, which is not a bad price for what it is, because it's this sort of strategic management game which puts you in mind of this entire alternate future that reflects on the present and that kind of stuff. So it's not bad for a tenner. If you would like to follow me more generally, and I'm trying to get more people to follow my blog rather than Spinnortality, because I don't know what my next project's going to be, and that would be the place to find it. You can find me on Twitter at James_D_Patton, and you can follow me on my blog at james-patton.net. That's Patton with an O, Patton. And if you Google any of that stuff, I'm sure that you'll be able to find it. So if you like the sound of me as a developer, then probably the best thing to do is to follow me on Twitter, and probably also follow my newsletter, the blog, because I will always keep people posted on what I'm doing there.
All right. And I'll have links for all that down below in the description. So everyone, go check it out if there's something interesting, if this is that type of game. Once I get my streaming computer set up, I will get to stream this game. I've been enjoying it on my off time, but it's something I would like to share with the public. But yeah,
we have fun.
So once again, James, thank you for taking the time to join me on this show. And for the listeners, thank you again for taking the time to join us for this hour of fun and learning. So until next time, see ya.